here an EVE Online player? Ah, okay, great. So, being mean in space. EVE Online is a game that is mostly in the headlines when something is stolen or destroyed on an epic scale. And I got very interested in EVE Online through all of these news articles. And I'm a historian, and now I have been playing EVE for about 7 years. So it draws you in, and then you continue to play. But why? So, perhaps a little bit of background. EVE Online is made by CCP Games, which is an Icelandic game developer. It's a sandbox, an MMORPG, and it was started in 2003, so it's close to 15 years old and still kicking, which is extraordinary. And it has around 500,000 players from over 200 countries, all in one single shard universe. And the only exception there is China, because, well, they have the Great Firewall, and even the games are state-controlled there, so yeah. There are around 7,800 different star systems with a variety of planets where players can build stuff. And everything in EVE is built and destroyed by the players. So every action has real meaning. Also, not only in the context of winning a battle, but also in the context of market interaction, of prices, of market manipulations, and stuff like that. So this is a player depiction of the learning curve in EVE. More than once I was close to being one of those. So EVE is hard, and it was designed that way because it is allowed to lie, cheat, scam, and steal in the game. If you're deleting some Nigerian scam or some funny spam email, I can assure you EVE Online is worse. There are a lot of tricky contracts where you can lose stuff because they just add a 0 at the wrong end. And it's all fair game there. You can't go to a game master and try to undo what you have done or what another player has done. While you have PvE, some form of PvE in the game, with the equivalent of raids and of farming on different levels, the thing that's most interesting in this game is the PvP. And the PvP is not only shooting at other players, it's also market manipulation. It's also tricking players out of game to do stuff in game. And all of these little actions lead to interactions with thousands of players in one star systems, with large battles and a lot of epic storylines, player-created storylines. And everything that has been destroyed has to be rebuilt by players. And every battle needs logistics. And a lot of traditionally only found in real-life conflicts, a lot of background work that's traditionally only found in real-life conflicts. So they have modeled a lot of the hard stuff from real life into this game. Now, why would you play this? I mean, come on. If we look at the players, there are around 95% male players, but there is a loud and ferocious minority of female players, often in quite prominent positions. The average age of the player has slowly increased with the age of the game, so it's now around 32 years. And the playtime is around 2.5 hours per day. It has a dual model of pay-to-play and free-to-play. So you can get into the game with alphas that are player characters. You play a capsule that can dock in different ships. So most of the time you see a ship, not a player as your avatar. And they can fly all the ships and can do all the stuff in EVE Online. But still, you can train for around 2 years, just to show you the depth, to really get to the skills that the free-to-play player has. And you can train around 5, 6, 7 years and still not have all the skills that you can get in the game. So even there, they didn't think small. Now, to illustrate how cutthroat EVE can be, I just want to tell one little story about the Player Alliance. This is or was a very old alliance in the game. Some of the players were there from the start, so they invested around 14 and a half years of their life in this game. And this specific alliance has around 5,000 players. 5,000 players who interact, who have to be managed, who have to be herded, who have to be educated in the ways how they can help the cooperation. So there's a lot of background stuff and out-of-game stuff going on that mostly nowadays is done through voice chat or Slack or Mumble. And the leader of this alliance was Giggs, the man without hair. And on the other hand was his chief diplomat, the judge. And 2 years before, there was they fought over the direction the alliance should go, and the judge hatched a grudge. And recently, 2 months ago, the judge finally killed the whole alliance, more or less. He affected the play of 5,000 players because he stole all of the alliance assets. He transferred most of the war assets to their enemies they were fighting at the time, including their stations from which they staged. So when the alliance leader logged in, he was a Serbian national and was prone to rage. The judge had set up another trap for him, a personal trap, an out-of-game trap. He invited him to a chat, and he streamed the chat, and he provoked him until the other player made real-life threats, and then he screenshotted that and let him get permabanned by CCP, because that's the only rule there is. The game should remain the game. It shouldn't get over into real-life threats. Although you can play the game out of game, it should stay with the avatars and not with the persons. So that's what the judge did. And 5,000 players logged in the next day, and everything they had fought for, everything they had built for years was gone. And to say it with Terry Pratchett, he was an artist of theft, and he did not merely steal everything that was not nailed down, but he also stole the nails. So there was nothing left for those players. And that's bad agency in EVE Online. And the whole number of the heist is 1.5 trillion ISK. That's the in-game currency, and strangely enough, it's also the short form of the Icelandic krona. So that's an interesting future they depict. And to show you what this means in real-life time and real-life money, because it's a pay-to-play interaction, it's about the equivalent of over $20,000, $25,000 that has been stolen there. If you try to calculate it. The big ship at the top, that's an Avatar, that's one of the biggest ships you can get, and you need 3,400 hours of gameplay building stuff to get this ship in-game. So if you lose it, it really, really hurts. And believe me, you hold a grudge against the person that kills these ships if you have built them for 3,400 hours. So what EVE offers are three-dimensional enemies, because they also play us. And you can rally against them. And you rally against them not only because they are enemies, but also because they have hurt you. So that's what EVE is, as a game. I asked myself why I play this game throughout these 7 years at various losses. And one thing I found very interesting is that even though there are losses, there are always players who help you. So in EVE you will find the worst enemy, and you will also find good friends that try to overcome these obstacles. And both of them are players. And contrary to other MMOs, it's this agency for bad really drives the story. And it drives long storylines. It drives storylines that people stay in an alliance for 2 years to execute the perfect heist. And that is something that you won't find in many other games. And I think that is especially because there is so much agency for evil. And you can contrast it, for example, with World of Warcraft, where the subscriber numbers are much higher, but there's much less agency to really, really meaningful, and I say this in quotes, hurt another player. And that's what drives this game. So why do players play this space game? This one is from one of the famous battles. And if we talk about immersion, you can easily see that at least spatial immersion is not the reason players play it. It might, and therefore, we might use presence as a concept more easily, and say perhaps it's narrative and tactical presence, but you cannot really immerse in a game where the overview is so convoluted because there are 5,000 to 10,000 players in a system. Each of them has up to 5 to 6 different ships and drones and everything deployed, so that the overview looks like this. That's also why most of the power players don't even use sound and turn down the graphics. So another thing where you can see that that spatial immersion is not the main reason you play this game. And for those other reasons to play, especially narrative immersion, those can be, you can immerse yourself into the narrative more easily through out-of-game means, because it's not only, give me a moment. It's not only that that you have out-of-game communication, you also have out-of-game news channels and a lot of out-of-game propaganda and out-of-game communication going on. And CCP wants to keep it that way. So how do they get a feel for what players want? They have installed sort of a player focus group, which I think is a very good idea for each game that really wants to stay around for longer. So what they do is players vote representatives, and those representatives are flown to CCP in Iceland, and there they can give feedback on new features. They can't tell the other players, but at least you get a feel for the different groups and the different interests. And therefore they can develop more to the players' likings, because all of those subscribers, they are long-term subscribers. So it really is, if they are invested for a long time in the game, it makes perfect sense to try to sound out what they really want. And the players thanked CCP by really doing a lot of interesting and mad stuff. Here you see the propaganda, which is one thing I, as a historian, really enjoy. And it's each of these little propaganda posters has its own history, and this history is player-driven. So it's not that there is a common narrative, but there is player lore, more or less, that develops through these interactions. And no ecosystem would be complete without media. So we really have EVE Online Media. We have 3 competing large news sites. We have EVE Radio. We have a lot of channels who drive the story. We also have fan fiction and even EVE Historian. So all of this happens out of game, and it's part of the reason why I think that the out-of-game narrative is really what keeps the game interesting for players and not immersion. What they also do, when I said in EVE you will find the worst and the best, a lot of people really fall for this game more than they should. They play more, they get problems because of it, and therefore other players try to give them a safety net. That's Broadcast for Reps. That's a group where players can ask other players to help them out and with real-life problems. And the EVE community is also quite generous. There are a lot of charities and stuff like that. So while they are cutthroat in-game, they are quite a good community out of game. Some call it a Stockholm Syndrome. Okay, so we have a community that's quite old. It's quite involved in the game. So what can we do with this community that might have repercussions out of game? I just have 2 examples here, which I think might be interesting. It's called, CCP was approached by scientists who had large amounts of quantitative data to shift through, and they asked the game developers to integrate the classification of those data parts in minigames. So what did CCP do? CCP started Project Discovery, which is a science project more or less, and they started it in 2014, and one project has been completed, another one is ongoing. And the first project was the Cancer Atlas. The players could, while waiting, categorize cancer cells to help science. And they were so effective that they didn't even need 4 to 5 months to really complete it. So that was really interesting and really showed that you can use the agency of players also out of game if you tap it in the right way. And the second one is the search for exoplanets, which is something that computers do not very well, meaning that they have problems classifying if there is a planet out there or not, and the players are quite good at it. So they have already, I think, 5 times finished the whole data sets, and the more they try, the better the results are. So these are things that can be done with a very invested community. And CCP also played to this, which is quite interesting. They, one of the slogans was "Eve is real," and what they did to really show this was make a monument, a real-life monument in Iceland, with all the subscriber names at the time. So the game has come full circle from a virtual world back to reality. And here you see, at the end, again, this agency for good and for bad. Because on the one hand, you see all the production that has to go on that the play can be played. On the other hand, you see the destruction that goes on so that players have fun in the game. And as long as this cycle of good and bad, of agency to building something and agency to destroy something continues, as long as that works out, I think that's as long we will have EVE Online. And what's very interesting is that the longer a game is played, the more you can use it for different scientific purposes. The London School of Economics tested a variety of market theories out on the EVE market. And the funny thing there was that 1 year before the banking crisis, there was a banking crisis in EVE Online because of the same reasons, which is quite interesting, and which is something that people are now still researching. So that was my short talk about EVE Online. I hope you have a lot of questions, and thank you for your attention.